This is Finding Human with Sue Jackson, only on 101.9 High FM.
Hello, this is Sue Jackson on the Finding Human program, and I'm with Lisa Kramer, who's in Israel, and we're on Zoom, and we're actually doing a pre-record. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you.
So nice to have you. We have cousin Gary Levy to actually thank for suggesting that I have you on my program. He said to me he felt that you'd be a very good fit. And then I had to agree with him because I went into your profile, and you are a psychotherapist. And what I really like to about you, I know that you deal with teens and young adults and life transitions, but you said that you often get stuck when people ask you, what is your therapeutic approach? And you said not because there's a lack of approaches to choose from, but because you believe that possibly how do we possibly shrink any person into any style or technique? And you go on to say, I suppose if I were to describe the work I do, it is the creation of a space to simply be human, a space to be seen and heard. Well, immediately I knew that you were a perfect fit. And you do work a lot. You work with youth at risk, and you've done that for the last 17 or 18 years. And
I used to do that more so, and now I just run my own clinical private practice here in Ranana.
And what about, let's talk about why you are also on this program. But actually, before going on to that, you also said that you believe that therapy should take place without a coffee in hand and a great serving of laughter on the side. Now, Viktor Frankl said the attempt to develop a sense of humor and to see things in a humorous light is some kind of trick learnt while mastering the art of living. So there you are. You have mastered the art of living, Lisa. So
I don't know about that, but I'll keep trying.
Now, tell me about why Gary actually wanted you to come on my program. I know, but our listeners need to know.
Gary is a neighbor and friend.
Right.
And I guess he had heard, aside from the practice that I run, I do some volunteer work with Hatzollah Israel. Hatzollah is, an emergency medical and psychotrauma relief organization that responds to tragedies all over the country as they're happening. But they also do plenty of work overseas when there are crises in the world at large. And one of the things that they have been really active in is the current crisis in Ukraine, trying very much to do a huge humanitarian effort, both to help, anyone who's trying to get out of Ukraine, but in particular as well, the Jewish community, of which there are about 400,000 Jews living in Ukraine. So Hatzollah has been helping those who want to or need to evacuate to get out, meeting them in the borders in Moldova, and then raising money and organizing for them to get on flights back to Israel if they're eligible or would like to come to Israel.
All right, and then I read what you actually said. You said, history repeating itself is not lost on me. As a Jew, I almost have it planted in my DNA. Walk warily in the world. History always repeats. And you said, I'm in Moldova, an empty, poor and cold country, watching a flood of Ukrainian refugees tread through snow with nothing but clothes on their backs. Now, what made you decide to go? That was a huge decision. Winston Churchill says, fear is a reaction. Courage is a decision. So where did this courage come from to make the decision?
Well, I didn't at the time see it as so courageous, to be honest. It was just, we have WhatsApp groups of when crises are coming up or emergencies and they're looking for responders. And I'd actually just been in Australia maybe 10 days before. A very good friend of mine had passed away, so I went to go be with her, and I came back maybe I was feeling a little down at the time, and I saw this message come through, and I thought, I'm not answering that. Someone else can answer that. They wanted volunteers for Moldova. And then I saw it come again, which meant they weren't finding people. And I thought, oh goodness, they're really desperate. So I phoned one of the women. I said, what's the deal? What do you need? And she said, we need someone for a week in Ukraine. I said, well, when do you need them to go? And she said, today.
Oh my gosh.
And I thought, oh God. So I thought, I'm not doing this. There's no ways I'm doing this. I actually phoned my husband thinking, of course he's going to tell me. I have 5 children as well, and I work full time. And I thought, for sure he's going to tell me, you can't go. Don't be ridiculous. You just got back, like, enough.
Relax.
And relaxed. And my husband decided to launch into the Zionist speech of his lifetime, which I wasn't expecting.
What did he say?
He really turned to me, and I was very grateful for the wisdom. He very much turned around and said to me, these things don't happen often in Jewish history, where we get to really respond to the needs of Jews around us. He really turned around and said, this is what became the making of the state of Israel. This is what has kept us here. This is why we believe in this so much. And now this opportunity has come. And not only that, this is the training that you have. So you're supposed to do it.
Gosh.
And he said, I think you should pack your bags and go, because there's not often that these are going to be the choices that we get to make and have the privilege of making. It was very hard to say I'm not going after that.
I'm quite sure. And so you left the next day.
I didn't leave the next day. I left that day. I left 4 hours later. I was at the airport.
Good heavens. How many people were actually there from United Hatzollah?
I don't know the exact numbers of the team, because the team kept changing. They're still there as we speak. So, as volunteers leave, new volunteers come, and our numbers change. From the psychotrauma unit, there were 4 of us at a time. And they would basically have divided. There are 2 borders in Moldova. So one team would be in the north border, one would be in the south border. And then we would have 2 psychotrauma working between the various camps that the refugees were being set up in.
But before you actually got there, what sort of feedback did you have? What preparation to know what you were going to?
There wasn't a lot of time for a lot of preparation. I mean, as psychotrauma, we're trained how to respond both to the trauma that's going on externally, for example, of, the refugees or whatever the situation is, and we do trauma work externally. And then there's also internal work, which is learning to work with our team and what's happening on the ground and who needs what, because obviously, well, the medics or, even logistics team, and we had lots of people who were coming just as Russian translators. They weren't medics and they weren't psychotrauma. They were coming just because we needed.
This is Finding Human with Sue Jackson, only on 101.9 High FM.
This is Sue Jackson, and I'm back with Lisa Kramer, and we're talking about her response to go to Moldova with Israel United Hatzollah. Lisa, I actually interrupted you there, and I was asking you, I should have let you finish your sentence. I'm sorry about that. But we are on Zoom at the moment and from a different area. So please go back to that you what to expect. What were you told? As you said, there wasn't much that people could actually feedback that you could have.
Probably the best input I got was from one of the heads of Hatzollah, who said to me, whatever you do will be psychotrauma. Whoever you speak to, you're going to be doing trauma work, whether you're working with our team or whether you're working with, people in the field. Every hug, every piece of chocolate, every blanket you give out, whatever you end up doing, that's going to be trauma work. And she was honestly correct. There was very little else that could have prepared me. You have the training that you have, but I don't think anything quite honestly prepared me for what we saw there.
What did you see there?
I want to say it was scary. It wasn't scary. We weren't in danger in Moldova. And I want to say that I was able to, like, in some way say, oh, we were like doing very heroic things. It didn't feel particularly heroic, and it didn't feel particularly brave. I think it felt mostly sad. What we saw was mostly women and children arriving at the borders with literally the small bag that they could carry. Lots and lots of elderly, people in wheelchairs, extremely frail, or special needs people. It was heartbreaking because it was mostly the most vulnerable images of people that you have in your mind is what you saw. I think what struck me a lot was the over-identification that I had. The people that I saw walking out, they looked like my friends with their babies, or they looked like my parents' age, and really coming out with nothing. You almost have the idea when you walk into people trying to escape war that it's so far away and so different from us. And I think what made it the hardest for me personally was how similar it all felt, how easily we could swap Ukraine with South Africa or with Australia or with Israel. It was so interchangeable that this could really happen to any nation, and how unprepared they were, how shocking it was to them.
And to see those children, those images of children, I must admit, I found absolutely heartbreaking. Lisa, just tell me, did you have any family that were lost in the Holocaust?
So I didn't have any family that was lost. What I did notice amongst the team is many of them did. And what was so interesting, we were sitting one night at dinner and we were looking at photographs from the day. And one of the girls on our team turned around and said, you know, if we put our photos in black and white, they look exactly like the Holocaust. And they really did. Even on one of the borders, there was a fence that didn't look exactly like Auschwitz, but could have easily been.
How frightening.
It was, you know, I definitely, you know, when we look at trauma work, we always look transgenerationally what's going on. And I think what's wounded so many people has been how strongly, on a really deep visceral level, it brings up so many images and memories that people hold from the Holocaust, whether it was their personal stories. There were so many elderly who had been through literally either their parents or as young children escaped the Holocaust. And just for us as a team to really be noticed, like how much it felt like a historical repetition of something that was very, very familiar.
So did you have to support each other a lot in the time there?
Yes and no. I think when you're on the field, everyone's just doing what they do and getting through, and just, you know, there's real camaraderie and friendship and lots of laughter and jokes, because that's how people respond to traumatic situations. And then there'd be more serious conversations, you know, of just, wow, it's, you know, I think at that point you're just aware of it being someone else's pain, and just, you know, as much as I think the efforts of Hatzollah were just beyond tremendous, you know, and that's something far bigger than me. For my own feeling was a real sense of drop in the ocean. You know, there was like, we were doing something, it was great, but it was hard not to hold that at the grand scheme of what was going on. It felt like very little.
But I think so often our choices at the time, we don't actually understand the greater meaning of our choices towards our own destiny, never mind the people that we might interact with, but our own destiny as well. You know, the other thing that you did say was that if they are Jewish, instead of me being a fellow Jew, sending them to their deaths under government threat, I'm a Jew sending them to their indigenous homeland. Now, you had Israeli flags, and I think you had Israeli on your flag on your jackets. What was that response, the response to that?
You know, we heard stories about kids and families when they were getting on buses from their various cities in Ukraine being told, when you see the people in the orange jackets, that's when you know you're okay. You know, I've had many moments where I've felt extremely proud to be a Jew. But this was probably my proudest. To have Israel be, or an Israeli flag be, the sign that someone can take a breath, for me was just a real privilege to be the one holding the flag. Israel is not a perfect country. I've lived here for 20 years. I, you know, have definitely had my ebbs and flows politically, emotionally. It's a difficult people to live with at times. And I'm very aware that there is a lot of shame that gets thrown from the diaspora towards Israel. But I think people should know I stood on those borders, and the percentage of presence that there was a Jewish presence standing both in Moldova, in Poland, in Bulgaria, not just Hatzollah. Hatzollah was one of many organizations, is disproportionate to any other country in the world.
Isn't that amazing? And we never hear about it. And that's why I'm determined to do these programs, quite honestly, to highlight what Israel is actually doing around the diaspora, wherever there is a problem. Israel is the first to get there, and we never hear about it from any of the mainstream medias. So to hear you speak about it and to hear how proud you were to be standing there and the reaction of other people to you, it actually brings tears to my eyes, to tell you the truth. It really does.
I don't know what to say, because I just felt it like a cog in that wheel, but I was like, wow, like this really is on the deepest level. You know, it's great to know what nations are like or what people are like in good times. It's very hard to know what they're like in bad times. And the thing about Israel is it just shows up. You know, I want to say that I was unique as a mom with a big family. I wasn't. There were many other mothers with children who were Israeli and packed up and said, I'm here to help. There were fathers, there were, you know, all sorts of people who they really take it on as, you know what, like our history tells us we didn't have a choice to be there, and now we do, and we just are. And I think Jews around the world could and should feel very, very proud of that fact. It is really an attribute to the nation that has been built here.
This is Finding Human with Sue Jackson, only on 101.9 High FM.
Hello, this is Sue Jackson, and I'm back with Lisa Kramer on the Finding Human program. And we were just talking about how incredible Israel is and what it does, and how proud she is, and how proud we in the diaspora are as well of Israel, Lisa. You know, apart from anything else, Israel is also supporting so many people in their own country who the cost of living is high, and they're supporting a lot of people, and to still be able to reach out to others and other countries is quite amazing. I know that United Hatzollah, Israel United Hatzollah, or how do you say it? Is that right? They are, say it properly for me.
United Hatzollah Israel.
And Hatzollah actually means relief or rescue in Hebrew, so it's very appropriate. But I saw this article on Google. That's where my doctorate comes from, and it was from on April the 5th, and it was actually talking about 3 Holocaust survivors who were rescued from Kiev and brought to Poland for care and safety. And it was an article written by Aaron Ben Arush, and he said, a few days ago, amid air raid sirens and bombings, we were fortunate enough to rescue 3 Holocaust survivors from Kiev and bring them to safety in Poland. As part of a major rescue operation that spanned 2 days, I, together with other members of United Hatzollah's Operation Orange Wings rescue mission, took 3 ambulances into Kiev in order to rescue the survivors and bring them across to the Polish border to safety. And he goes on to say that the 2 of the survivors were bedridden, and one could only move with great difficulty, and they were living in different areas. So they took 3 ambulances, and each ambulance went to the different Holocaust survivors to collect them. And he said as they drove from the Moldovan and the Polish borders to Kiev with medical teams on board, along the way they actually also delivered much needed food and medical supplies to the hospitals and care centers that had asked for help for providing these items. And he says the deliveries included medical supplies, bandages, medications that are in very short supply in Ukraine, and such as insulin. And he said it took them 3 days to make the round trip. Getting back was very difficult. He said they're trying to avoid bombings and attacks from snipers and missile attacks. And he said, and at certain points it made it more difficult because of the curfew. So he said they actually had to bribe different people along the way to get them through. And the bribes were not with cash, but it was actually with medical supplies, fuel and food, which so shows you the desperation in that area. But he said when we arrived at the border, all 3 patients, all of them women, thanked us profusely for rescuing them. And they said that they are living anew exactly what they had been through. The one woman, Svetlana, is 86 years old, and she says, I've been through 2 difficult times of war in my life. I was evacuated in both of them. The first war was in 1941. The next one was in this is now this. And she said the first time she was 5 years old. So she said she actually cannot believe. She said, thank God for you kind people. Last time there was no one there to help us. Thank you for helping us. Isn't that beautiful?
Yeah, truly.
Truly is. Now tell me how your family felt about your children, because they must have been watching the news and seeing what was going on.
So my kids are used to their crazy mother, who occasionally comes up with crazy things to do. So they're not totally shocked by me. And if I'm honest, at the time, I wasn't thinking about how my kids are going to pray. I was aware that I was leaving and my older boys were at school till late. So I phoned them to say, just come back and say bye to me because I won't see you for a week. And they're like, what? Where are you going?
And you had just got back from Australia.
I just got back. So my kids, I think there were a couple things that shocked me that I didn't plan on, really. One was I didn't realize that they would be so proud of me. And it was never my goal. But, I wasn't aware that it was such a big deal until I realized, it is kind of a big deal, more on a national level. And it was a privilege for me to take part, but I was humbled to see that it was great for them to watch us taking part in the best parts of our nation. And, with kids, it's always so interesting to me because we spend so long thinking how to educate them and what they'll pick up on, what they won't. And we spend so much time worrying about who we think they should be and what they should do and their success stories. And so much of the work that when I do with parents is I'm like, get out of your kids' way. They're going to be who they're going to be. How about you just become the person that you think you should be? And so I didn't realize the impact that has on them when I actually just do that. And my oldest son, I got back and I didn't even know about it. He didn't actually tell me until I said to him, where are you? He kept disappearing in the afternoons. And it turns out he had been going here in Ranana where I live. They were doing a massive collection, but the collection had got really chaotic and my son Eitan had gone in just to start helping them out. And before I knew it, he was actually one of the main guys in charge, sorting out how to collect and organize all these clothes and toys and nappies and food, etc., that were going to be given out to refugees that are living here in Israel. And I had no idea that he was even doing it. He just kind of did it really quietly. I was like, where did this come from? And he said, Mom, I guess that's what we're learning to do.
Isn't that wonderful?
Don't worry, there's 5 of them. So there's plenty of room for my kids to be. I'm not allowed to say rude words on the radio. They're very normal kids. But it was such a lesson to me from I work a lot with parenting, and from the parenting perspective that when we stop really trying to shove our values down our kids' throats in terms of who they better be or what they better do, and just start really being who we can be and living our best and truest selves. I think that is the greatest lesson for our children. And so actually, I think they took it really well.
Well, what you're saying, I think, is just amazing because making choices doesn't only affect our lives. It has this big of impact on others' lives too. And the choices that we make so often can change the generations to come, funnily enough, their lives and their choices that they're going to make in the values that you have chosen to show without even thinking that you were doing it.
It's interesting to me because I was born in South Africa, but I grew up in Australia and then moved to Israel in my 20s. And when I went back to Australia now, it was the first time I'd been back in many years. And I absolutely love Australia. I love South Africa too. I think they're beautiful places. And I found myself revisiting as an adult, and I had this terrible moment where I was like, wow, I made such a big decision to move to Israel when I was so young. And that decision has a massive impact on my children. You know, my oldest son is now just received his first call up to the Israeli army, which is a whole other level of stress as a mom. And I was almost feeling guilty about, did I make the right decision? I was so young and so idealistic. And maybe that was what this also came about for me, because it reignited that part of me that's really passionate about the state of Israel and the Jewish people. And being able to really demonstrate to my kids as well what an absolute privilege it is to really be able to sit on this side of history. You know, I often have that guilt feeling about, oh my goodness, am I really sending my children one day to the army? You know, I've been through many wars in the army with my husband. It's very different when it's your own kids. And yet I have this other part of my brain that says, if it's not my children, whose children should it be? Is anyone's children more dear than my own? You know, they're all dear and precious to every mother. And at the same time, what a privilege that we get to stand on this side, because if we're not here, I really do shudder to think what history or what the future would look like for us.
And diaspora Jews everywhere. If you think about the Ethiopians coming in and the Moroccans coming in, you know, Jews from all over the world who have found refuge in the state of Israel. Heaven knows what would have happened, quite honestly. My father was a bomber pilot in the war and bombed Germany, obviously, and had to go through Bergen-Belsen. And as a non-Jew, he was absolutely appalled by what he saw and said we would never, ever have any form of racism in our family. And we never did. And he lived to see me become an Orthodox Jew, and my daughter, he didn't live long enough to see my one daughter go and living in Israel, making that choice. But he certainly saw his grandchildren being brought up as Jews. And he was very proud of that fact. So, you know, I think we all come with our own history, and it's to be proud of where we come from and actually make a difference wherever we are. And you have definitely made that difference. Just tell me a bit about the Hatzollah itself. What made you decide that you wanted to be involved with an organization like that?
I was training in trauma, and it was fascinating to me. I don't say I love the world of trauma, but it's certainly a very, very fascinating place to study in terms of the world of therapy and understanding it, because there's so many shifts and changes there. And I really do believe that that's where great healing happens. You know, trauma works very much not just on a cognitive thought level, but also in the body. And a friend of mine actually said to me, you should go do the training at Hatzollah. And at the time, I thought, don't be mad. And then I thought, well, it's really good training, at least therapeutically. I don't know what I'll do with it. And so I did this training a few years ago. And the truth is, I'm often terrible because I'm terrible with blood. And I'm terrible with tragedy. So I will be honest, since I've been a very reluctant, very nervous Hatzollah person. And at one point I even thought, no, I'm dropping out of this. This is too hectic for me.
Gosh, I can't believe it.
And then you get humbled, because the truth is, then you meet some of the medics and you see the work that they do. Some of them can go on 10, 15, I even know guys who go on 20 calls a week, responding to every crisis around this country. I mean, they put me to shame. It's a whole other level of real dedication and care. a lot of the team, when I went to Moldova, I didn't know anyone. There was, they were from all over the country, so I didn't know anyone. And then been the latest bout of terror attacks. And all of a sudden, I realized the first responders were people from our team on Hatzollah. They were there calling the police, calling while shooting was still going on. And, some of them were still actually in danger. So I actually feel very humbled. I'm really a tiny, tiny cog in what is a tremendous wheel. With people who just do unbelievable acts of kindness every day.
And Mark Twain said that kindness is a language the deaf can hear and the blind can see. And how true is that? Because I'm quite sure when you were in Moldova, there were many times when you couldn't actually speak to people because they couldn't understand you.
That was my experience most of the time. I didn't expect that the level of English was almost, very little most of the time, and certainly not Hebrew. Sometimes you'd meet someone who had a cousin and they knew Shalom or something like that. And so language actually was very difficult. We were very lucky to have Russian translators, and you'd sort of be grabbing them like, I need you, get over here. But I think that's what really took my breath away. In the world of trauma, you learn about the healing power of eye contact. And I didn't realize how much just looking at someone. I'm never afraid to cry in front of people. So, just sharing a tear between us, handing them a cup of tea or a chocolate. It was freezing there. The cold really took me by surprise. It was really, I've never experienced cold like that. I mean, I'm from Australia, so that's not saying much, but I really hadn't experienced cold like that. Just being able to give them, we'd have special heating blankets, and just to be able to give them a blanket or some, like almost a warm little pouch that they could hold in their hands. Just that act of kindness. I didn't have to say a word, just hand them something warm.
It was an act of humanity, wasn't
it?
And
I could never, ever fully describe the gratitude that was met with. It really, they didn't need words, but they were speechless, after you see such cruelty, to be met with kindness, without exception, it reduced people to just really heartfelt tears. It really did.
That's so heartbreaking to hear. But at the same time, it's a wonderful thought that you were able to do that. And that Hatzollah are there, and they've now started a field hospital. And I saw that the Ukrainian minister had thanked Israel very much for that, and for and it's called. I'm just trying to think. Kohav Ma'ir, after Golda Meir, the Israeli Prime Minister. Isn't that lovely that it's called that? I see that the Ukrainian foreign minister thanked Israel for opening the field hospital and for Israel's tireless work. The other thing that I did notice, which I thought was a very good idea, was that a lot of the medics that they sent were actually from Russia and from Ukraine, so they did speak the language, which I'm sure probably helped quite a bit.
Right.
Have you had any contact with the hospital at all, or know anything about them?
So, Hatzollah had its own mini, emergency care tents set up in Moldova. But, there's various hospitals at the various borders. So, I only obviously worked with the one that we were involved with. But, there's the actual hospitals from Israel that have set up these field hospitals at a different border to where we were based. And so, but certainly the one based in Moldova where Hatzollah was running, at one point when there wasn't room for people to sleep, we took tents and converted it into an area where people could sleep. And as that sort of eased up and they were able to be held in various organizations around Moldova, the tents were transformed, but there was always like a medical response mini hospital set up with Hatzollah in Moldova. So,
what on the Moldova border when you were there, which was really at the beginning, you were one of the first teams to leave, weren't you, to get there?
There was a team that went a week before me, and then we came,
Were other countries there at the same time as you were there?
There are. I mean, Hatzollah was based in the middle of Moldova, and then there are two borders, a north and south border. And so we would travel to those borders, which were each about 4 hours away from where we were based But at the various borders, there are different countries and different organizations trying to do things, each to their own capabilities. There's a lot of crisis work going on, so it's hard to know who's doing what. And so we kind of just put our heads down and, did what we needed to do and responded. I mean, they have an incredible team set up, working endless hours to respond to every call and every inquiry, to fundraise that we can bring. A big piece of Hatzollah's work was bringing planes in to bring people to Israel. I don't even think I know half the work that's gone into, or a quarter of the work that's gone into this huge rescue effort.
Not only the rescue effort, but the survival effort as well, with the humanitarian aid going in. I mean, that is just amazing what Israel's sending.
It's phenomenal, and I don't even think people grasp proportionately, for such a small country, how huge the effort has been in proportion to things going on around the world. It really is, Israel, I truly, I'll never sugarcoat it and say it's a perfect country. It's really not perfect. But when it comes to humanitarian care, I don't think we're good. I think we're exceptional.
Isn't that fantastic? Just tell me, leaving Moldova, when you left Moldova, how did you feel leaving and knowing that the war was going on?
I think the hardest part for me was actually coming home. Because while I was there, you're just in it and you're doing what you're doing. And when I came home, it was like a hero's welcome. Honestly, people met me at the airport, and the comments and the things I received. And well, I'm not someone who can't hold a compliment. It was actually really hard for me to hold. It sort of sent me into a bit of a downward spin almost, because I really didn't feel that way. I was flattered by how people had been impacted by it. But for me, it was really heartbreaking, which I suppose leaving a war zone is, because you become really cognizant of, even though the efforts felt big, the tragedy was so much bigger. And so, to be honest, I came back and really I could, on one hand, on a national level, feel extremely proud. And on a personal level, I actually felt just really sad.
Oh, I'm sure you must have. Really. And did you, when you got back, did you then prepare other people who were going after you?
They had already left. We just keep going. Hatzollah has its own team inside that works with people as they're coming back and preparing out. So
good, fantastic.
This is Finding Human with Sue Jackson, only on 101.9 High FM.
Hello, this is Sue Jackson, and I've just been showing Lisa Kramer, who's on my program with me, I've just been showing her a photo of herself in Moldova with a hoodie on and looking absolutely freezing. We're going to have to wrap up shortly, but how would you like to end?
I'm often aware from a distance, because I've lived in Israel a long time, a lot of the hard feelings that Jews around the world have toward Israel. And, I guess I'm going to take this opportunity while I'm talking to South African Jewry in the diaspora to really say, you have a lot to be proud of about Israel. You really do. It is not a perfect country, but it's a great country. And the care and the effort for Jews, and not just Jews, actually for people everywhere, Israel is exceptional. And I think while people are very quick to judge and to tear down or to remind us about what isn't good enough, I really hope they're able to hold what's amazing. And I think South African Jewry should really rest assured that Israel has their back. I think maybe sometimes I would love to hear louder voices of people really stepping out in defense of what we do and what is right. I think it's super easy to find what's wrong with every person and certainly with every nation. I think greater is the person who can find what's right and what is working. Because when we put our focus there, we tend to get a lot more of it. So maybe that would be my word to say. I really hope that is what comes out of South African Jewry when it comes to Israel.
I hope so too, because I must admit it is my absolute wish that we realize what Israel actually means to us, what they do for the world Jewry, and not only world Jewry, as you've just been indicating, how they helped everybody. You didn't have to be a Jew to get a warm blanket. to get a cup of coffee or a cup of soup, whatever it might have been, to get the humanitarian aid. It is going to everyone, which is absolutely beautiful. And this the hospital that we were talking about in Israel is it's operating under the name Kohav Ma'ir, and which means shining star. And I think that's what Israel is. It is a shining star. And thank you so much, Lisa, for being on my show. But I just want to say that Richard Attenborough said, and I love what he actually said, he said, there is a light in this world, a healing spirit more powerful than any darkness we may encounter. We sometimes lose sight of this force when there is suffering and too much pain. But then suddenly the Spirit will emerge through the lives of ordinary people who hear a call and answer in extraordinary ways. So may you and may Israel and may all who actually help the needy find those extraordinary ways to go on. Thank you so much for being on my program.
Thank you for having me. I'm really humbled to have been here. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Vusi, for keeping us on air.
And joining us now, two doctors working at that field hospital. Pediatric surgeon Dr. Michael Siegel, who was born and raised in Kyiv before emigrating to Israel, and trauma surgeon Dr. Adam Lee Goldstein, who was originally from Washington, D.C. So, Dr. Siegel, among the patients you've come across, a 10-year-old girl who survived a heart condition, daily bombings, and sheltering in a basement. What condition was she in when she got to your field hospital, and how is she doing?
Well, she's doing fine. She was dehydrated when she came, but basically her main problem was that she had to travel for 3 days around in the car, and they had no place to stop. And the poor girl, she was very stressed, and they were totally deprived when they arrived. We treated them well, and we organized a transfer abroad.
Imagine just the emotional pain, to say nothing of the physical stress for these sick children. Dr. Goldstein, what are your expectations in terms of treating trauma cases there? What have you seen so far?
Look, it's our goal here is to help the population, the refugee population, the local population, to take stress off the local hospital. We didn't come on purpose. We didn't come to the front line because that's not our duty right now. As a general surgeon, a trauma surgeon, I'm prepared to do anything if it's. Even if it's helping relieve suffering from a little abscess that I can, drain bedside, to helping the local surgeons with major operations. It's a little bit of an unpredictable environment. Obviously, we hope that there's peace in the region and peace on Earth soon. But our main goal here is just to do whatever we can, from a hug to a major operation, whatever we can do to help.
Show us some of the aspects of the field hospital. Can you use your Zoom camera and try to show us a little bit of what's going on there today?
Yeah, so we really came Sheba Hospital and the Ministry of Health. We actually are standing in a simulation center, and today myself and Dr. Siegel, we gave a trauma course to a group of surgeons and anesthesiologists from Lviv. And we step outside, and we're housing in a beautiful school, which the staff of the school has been remarkable, helping us. We're sleeping there, they're feeding us, and this is the whole setup of the hospital. We have our emergency room, a women's center for gynecologists. 2 gynecologists are there. We have a pediatrics center and pediatric emergency room. And we have, as I mentioned before, we have a radiology tent, simulation center. So it's really a remarkable setup. We also have a very strong mental health setup that we're really trying to, give them whatever support they need, even if just talking and showing them that we care. And that's what we have going for us. It's we're about 20-30 yards from the local hospital, where we have 3 operating rooms that we can operate in. We've been performing elective surgery. Today we did elective hernia surgery for someone who's been suffering and just they can't work and it's bothering them. Dr. Michael, he diagnosed appendicitis in a 16-year-old boy, and we operated on him the next day. So emergent cases, anything in terms of the surgical, but that's really a small percentage of what's going on. We've seen already in the first 2 or 3 days, we've seen 300-400 patients have come through, and whatever's needed, we're doing.